Welcome back, Blue Jay fans. Jays from the Couch presents Blue Jays Talk for All, and it's free admission. So find your seat, settle in, and enjoy the views from the On Fek Circle. Always available on our YouTube channel. This misadventure streams live Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Can be followed on the Jays from the Couch Facebook page and on Twitter at Jays from Couch. Guaranteed will make you laugh and make you think. The On Fek Circle is just one of the YouTube channel family of shows to catch live or with a rain check. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you should put your Blue Jays colored glasses on to watch Sunny Side of the Dome, hosted by Karen Suter. No one, and I mean no one, talks Blue Jays baseball with the knowledge and heart and passion that Karen does. Both YouTube exclusive shows are archived, so if you like what you hear this week, be sure to go back and check out all of our episodes. Binge watching is highly recommended. But the programming jewel is and will always be the Jays from the Couch radio podcast hosted by senior editor and founder Shaun Doyle. The podcast records and streams at you live Mondays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and Shaun offers in-depth Blue Jays talk for all, conversations with Blue Jays players, beat writers such as Shai Davidi and Keegan Matheson. I'm fortunate, as is Karen Suter, to be a part of 99% of the podcast, and we're very honored to do that. And Shaun even brings in some out-of-town friends and experts like Matt Germain, who joined the podcast last night to gloat about the Tampa Bay Rays system. You can download all 291 episodes anywhere you find your finer podcast, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple. I mean, if they have some kind of oomph behind them, you're going to find Jays from the Couch radio podcast. I am your host and your madman across the border, the Fekless Wonder, Steve Fek. And thanks for coming back for another episode of the On Fek Circle. We have a couple of interesting things to talk about. As you can see in the graphic behind me, you're probably wondering why I have a Giants graphic up there, but if you notice, it says Toronto Giants. There was almost a Toronto Giants baseball team in 1976. That'll be the Blue Jays Bedtime Story at the end of the episode. Before I go on to any ranting or wonderings that I might have, let's talk about the inaugural season of the Jays from the Couch Fantasy Baseball League. Our editor and founder, Shaun Doyle, and I were kind of kicking around ideas and, just the thought of having a fantasy league with all of the listeners, well, not all of the listeners, but, with representatives from listeners, people from Jays from the Couch are going to be part of this. And we can just have another excuse to sit down and just talk baseball, but on a daily basis. As much as I could easily probably do an 8-hour show 7 days a week, you certainly don't want that. And I know Shaun doesn't want that. So this gives us a nice little outlet to talk Blue Jays baseball and just baseball in general throughout the season. We have 3 slots left. We're going to try to cap it at 14 teams, but if we have enough of a demand, we can expand it to 16. It'll be a little bit more challenging for the draft. Our live draft is April the 2nd at 7:15 Eastern Time. We're using the Yahoo Fantasy Sports platform. It's very user-friendly. It allows you to pre-rank players if you can't make the live draft. A lot of interesting scoring categories. It's a rotisserie league. It's head-to-head, and it's one win. So there's going to be 19 categories to pretty much eliminate any chance of ties in any given week, because there's no ties in baseball. There shouldn't even be ties in spring training games, but that's just the cranky old man in me speaking about that. So it's going to be, you have to have a balanced team. It's going to be a great challenge, but it's going to be just so much fun. So if you are interested, you can send me an email at Fekless Wonder. I'm sorry, not at Fekless Wonder. Forget the at part. It's Fekless Wonder at jaysfromthecouch.com. And it's first come, first serve. Send me the link. I try to get it to you within a couple of hours. Being an older man, I tend to drift off to sleep earlier, so maybe it might need to wait till the morning. But if you can deal with that, that's great. If you wanted to send me a private message on Twitter, at Fekless Wonder is my Twitter handle. I also check that as well. 3 slots at this point left, but if there is enough of a demand over the next couple of days, we'll kick around maybe expanding to 16 teams. So it's been awesome watching Blue Jays baseball, MLB TV. I use Roku as my streaming platform. They've had between 4. Rob Report. Hey, Steve. Steve. Hey, how are you? The Rob Report is going to be fielding a team. Christian's going to be there and fielding a team in our inaugural season. So he's not necessarily a Blue Jays diehard fan. I think he roots for the Orioles. So we'll be gentle with him and we'll be kind to him. You know, it's tough enough having to be an Orioles fan. And when we do our bedtime story, Blue Jays fans could have been Oriole fans. We'll talk about that just real briefly as well. But watching spring training games day in, day out has been awesome. I've been able to catch all but one. MLB TV has provided a feed, whether it be the Sportsnet feed or a out of town feed for all but the very first exhibition game. The Blue Jays crushed the Yankees today. They just absolutely crushed them. And I mean, there's a lot to be excited about. They've had at least 10 hits, I believe, in 4 of their exhibition games. The regulars are starting to see some time. Saw George Springer for the first time today. The pitchers, they're still working out things. Kikuchi made his Blue Jays debut today. He had some command issues, which he tends to do even when it's mid-season, but he seemed to straighten it out really quickly. And he and Pete Walker seem to have a plan about how he can better utilize his pitches because he has a nice arsenal, but really kind of set up that curveball with his 2 types of fastballs. He settled in well. Ross Stripling looked good. Trevor Richards pitched today. And it's actually sort of the thing I want to talk about before we get to our bedtime story. There is a new device. And my thanks and kudos to Bob Ritchie, a terrific writer for Jays from the Couch. He and I are probably the only couchers that are old enough to vividly remember the first Blue Jays season. But Bob is embraced and is so wonderful at being able to explain analytics and how they apply to player decisions and all. Where I certainly am on the opposite end of that spectrum, but I just can't put down his articles when he puts them up. But Bob posted behind the scenes. We have a little message board, and article from Adam Berry about a new pitch calling device. And it's literally like a little mini remote control that catchers are wearing on their left forearm. I don't think there's any left-handed throwing catchers anymore in baseball. I know there were a couple for a while, but he wears it in there, and he literally calls the pitches from this device. Now, in the regular season, pitching coaches can't wear it. I know Pete Walker didn't wear his today, but Trevor Richards, actually under the brim of his cap, had a little antenna. They say it's between 4 and 6 inches. Looked like it's closer to 6, and an earpiece. So when Danny Jansen goes down to this little device, he can pick out. They already know in advance, for each pitcher, 1's fastball, 2's curveball, 3's a slider, whatever the repertoire would be. So they know in advance what that would be, as opposed to using the hand pumps. So he can call 1 for a fastball. He can call for it to be up in the zone, down in the zone, in or out, just with this little device. And it's going to play back through that antenna into the earphone. So even before Trevor Richards was getting to the mound, Danny Jansen had already called the next pitch. Pretty cool. And as of now, the device is set up for English speakers and people who speak Spanish, which is the bulk of players. But there's no reason that you couldn't have a device that would translate it into Japanese or Korean or Chinese, where, you do have people from Asia that are pitching in the major leagues, Kikuchi, Ryu for the Blue Jays, for example. So this device, it's going to eliminate any communication errors when the catchers calling these pitches. Now, the idea is to speed up the game, cut down on mound visits. If somebody suddenly there's a runner on second, the catcher has to go out there and change, the indicator. Okay, one pump is the indicator, so now a fastball is 2 fingers, curveball is 3 fingers. There's a lot going involved in that. It is going to cut down on sign stealing, and that doesn't mean as much to me. I think it's just way overblown. And when Blue Jay fans complain about teams like the Astros and the Red Sox and the Yankees sign stealing, they have had the Zen master of sign stealers in John Gibbons in their dugout. They've had Cito Gaston, Bobby Cox. About the only thing that Jimmy Williams did well as Blue Jays manager was be able to figure out, when pitchers were tipping their pitches and sign stealing, he and his staff. So the Blue Jay fans, every team does it on some level. But this device, once pitchers get used to it, truly will change the pace of the game for the better. Now, I know the Rays were the first to use it. Mike Zunino, who's probably, if not the best defensive catcher, he's right there with Jacob Stallings and our own Danny Jansen and Yadier Molina. He loved it. He thought it was great. And he's working with a very young pitching staff as opposed to a veteran pitching staff like the Jays. So that's going to be very, very helpful for him. He loved it. When the Tigers used it against the Jays, AJ Hinch was not a big fan of it. His pitching coach and pitchers were not big fans of it. Today, when Trevor Richards pitched his inning, came in, and he and Danny Jansen and Pete Walker had a little powwow, Hazel May pulled aside Pete Walker and asked what the reaction was. And he said that Richards said it was okay, that he felt in the beginning it kind of affected his rhythm. Pitchers are creatures of habit. It's very, very important. Take Jordan Romano's old delivery when he used to do the squat, he even still now, there are certain mannerisms that I know he's doing to help him not fly open when he releases and have a consistent release point. There's a reason that he did all of those things. It was working for him, that deep squat. So pitchers don't like many things to change. Personally, I would rather have that device than a pitch clock. Because, if you're already a little bit rattled or a little bit nervous, or especially with a younger pitcher and you're looking over your shoulder, even though younger pitchers are used to the pitch clock in the minors, not looking over your shoulder, looking up at the scoreboard, but you can just focus in on what's going on. If you can if you can limit sign stealing, okay, that's a strategic advantage. So the pitchers are going to have to adjust. I don't think it'll be a big deal for a catcher. I think catchers would love this. It just makes it so much easier. There's going to be nuances that come up. There's going to be problems and times when it breaks down. It's anytime the technology is involved, it's going to happen. But this new pitch calling device, I haven't been this excited about a rule change or about technological advances, and I don't know how long. This is just a wonderful thing on the horizon. It has already been tested in the California League, which is a high level A minor league, and pitchers there and coaches there loved it. I just think it's another way, without getting Rob Manfred and this committee of players and MLB representatives and executives and all of that all involved in this and juggling things around and debating this and that and this and that. This is just a simple way to have the game move more quickly. Trevor Richards, literally, when the ball came back to him, by the time he stepped on the mound to retake the rubber, he already had his pitch and he was already giving the one nod ready to go. Pitchers can still shake him off. I'm kind of glad that they will not allow pitching coaches to have an antenna and earpiece in game, because I just think that creates too many situations where the pitching coach calls time or the dugout calls time, and then you have unnecessary mound visits. This new pitch calling device, keep an eye out for it. If as you're watching exhibition games, if you're watching any shows on MLB Network or Fox or anything like that, this is transformational. This pitch calling device, and I liked what I saw. I mean, I think watching Richards pitch, I think you could tell it was kind of in his head a little bit, but once he got through the first couple of pitches, I think he was already finding his rhythm and getting in the routine. So I think this is a wonderful thing for Major League Baseball coming out. And I think when you have a catcher the caliber of Danny Jansen behind the plate, I think that is a strategic advantage that the Blue Jays can take advantage of. It's time now for another Blue Jays bedtime story. Last week we kicked it off in the first chapter, and it's not designed to put you to sleep. I'm not that boring. If anything, I'm more annoying than boring, so you would never be able to fall asleep as I'm talking. But we're going to present a different story from Blue Jays history. It might be quirky, it could be funny, it could be historic. We get so involved in, oh my God, who's going to be that, that the long reliever, or who's going to be able to take over a spot in the rotation if someone gets hurt or needs a rest, or they go to a six-man rotation, or who's the left-handed bench bat. We get so wrapped up in that we kind of forget reasons why we fell in love with baseball. So that's what we're going to do here with the Blue Jays bedtime stories. Hopefully that you enjoy them. If you have an event in Blue Jays history, or something, or a story that you think should be told about a player or whatever it would be, you can send me a message, Fekless Wonder at jaysfromthecouch.com. I would love to integrate it into the show. Today, we're going to talk about a once upon a time when Giants almost started to roam the Toronto lakefront and take over Exhibition Stadium. In 1976, Horace Stoneman, the then owner of the Giants, the same greedy slob that moved the Giants out of their ancestral home in the Polo Grounds in Manhattan, New York, out to the West Coast, out to San Francisco, for money. He did it for money. He felt that the attendance was split too many ways in New York. There was an untapped market out in California. That same Horace Stoneman sold the San Francisco Giants to a Toronto consortium, and had a U.S. court not interceded, in 1976, the Toronto Giants would have began play at Exhibition Stadium in the NL West. And we'll get to some of the quirky things later in the story. But it really all started in 1973 when Paul Godfrey, who was a Ontario politician, I believe he was from York, if I remember correctly when I was doing some research, he became the chairman of Metro Toronto. And he was a sports fan. And it really bothered him that Montreal had a baseball team and not Toronto. Not that necessarily in the late 60s, Toronto had an ownership group in place or was that gung-ho about getting baseball. But then once Montreal got it, oh, wait a minute, Toronto has to have it. That rivalry between the cities and the provinces reared its head. So almost immediately, he went about trying to put together an ownership group. But first, he went to the winter meetings in 1973. Uninvited, he just showed up. Was able to get a private audience with then Commissioner Bowie Kuhn. And Bowie Kuhn, of course, was excited about a market like Toronto, but he was very straightforward, and said that you have to have a stadium first. It's not a build it and they will come scenario per se, but he was very clear. You have to have a stadium. And at that point, Exhibition Stadium was not a Major League Baseball park. I loved it once it did become the home of the Blue Jays, but at the time it was not. So he was discouraged, but it did not keep him from going back and trying to put together an ownership group. At the same time, Don McDougall, who was president of Labatt's Brewery, was also gung-ho about bringing baseball to Toronto because he looked at it as the way not only to sell more beer in general in the province of Ontario, but they were a distant third in most markets in Canada. You had Molson and Carling, a lot of these other breweries. They were a distant third in the prime market, which was Toronto. And what better way to have a built-in market and audience for your product than owning a Major League Baseball team? So those two really were the main guys going in there. Cleveland had talked about coming to Toronto, but that was never really serious. They did talk to the minority stakeholders of the Baltimore Orioles in 1973 into 1974, who they themselves were owned by National Brewing Company. But the Hoffenbergers, who headed NBC, not the network, but the brewery, quickly went and bought up most of the minority stockholders' shares. So that idea was scuttled. But can you imagine the Orioles? The Orioles being in Toronto? I hate the Yankees and I hate the Dodgers. But there's something about the Orioles that I just don't know. Cincinnati Reds too, but the Orioles, they've always bothered me ever since I was a kid. Growing up, they were always competing with the Red Sox. And I was a Red Sox fan before the Blue Jays came into existence. But the Orioles, that would have been just painful. But then out of the blue, in December of 1975, Horace Stoneman's lawyers contacted this Toronto group, which by now included the Canadian banks CBIC or CIBC. I'm sorry, I think it's CI. I think it's Canadian Imperial Banking Corporation, as well as the Labatt's group headed by McDougall and the Toronto Globe and Mail, their parent company, were all involved in this group, and they came to an agreement to sell the Giants because Stoneman was bleeding money in San Francisco to this group in Toronto, and they were going to move. It was announced on January 9th, 1976. They were going to move to Toronto to start playing baseball in the NL West because the schedule was already made for the 1976 season, that centennial season. Now, the Giants, when they first went to San Francisco, drew very, very well. But their ballpark, Candlestick Park, was problematic. Now, for those of you that have never been to Candlestick, it's not there anymore. It got cold like few places. Certainly sports stadiums got cold. And to kind of tie in, I guess, to give you an idea, because most of you that are watching this podcast or this YouTube show are probably Canadian or have Canadian roots. If you think about weather in the Maritimes and then when the nor'easters come through, okay, you're not going to get that much snow. And you're not having hurricane force winds. But it's pretty sustained and it's pretty damp. The maritime climate can be a little dicey. But as far as like feeling cold, those of you that are either from Winnipeg or have been to Winnipeg, and that clipper comes out that blows across Lake Winnipeg or Lake of the Woods. It wasn't as cold as Winnipeg. It was close. So fans just stayed home. They stopped even when they reduced the number of home games being broadcast. They just didn't come out. San Francisco was last in the majors in attendance in 73, 74, 75. Now, part of the reason for that is the Oakland A's moved to the Bay Area in 1968 and almost immediately started winning division titles, or at least contending for them. They won back-to-back World Series. Actually, they won 3 times, actually. So the Bay Area was becoming Oakland A's territory. So the Giants wanted out. One big issue that gave them a legal way to try to block the sale in San Francisco was that there was 10 years remaining on the lease at Candlestick Park, which was built on demand to accommodate the Giants moving to San Francisco. They played at Seal Stadium, which was a AAA stadium, the first 2 years, I believe, of their existence. Might have been the first 3 years. Might have been 57, 58, 59. They played at Seal Stadium, and then they went to Candlestick. So that was going to be an issue. But a bigger problem was in San Francisco. The mayor, George Moscone, literally had just been inaugurated. The day before the sale was announced, he'd just been inaugurated, and he ran on a platform of widespread urban redevelopment, trying to attract new business, making it a big business hub again. So he wasn't going to just go into the night gently. He was going to fight it. He did get a temporary court injunction that blocked the sale temporarily, but it was only for 60 days. But that was enough time for local businessman Bob Lurie to put together enough financing and enough backers to make an $8 million offer that the court approved and then negated the sale of the Giants to Toronto. That was $5 million less. But once U.S. courts get involved, that was a problem. Now, what would have happened had Toronto gotten the Giants? Well, first of all, Canada would have been a National League juggernaut. You had the Expos and the Blue Jays. So from an attendance and a marketing standpoint, you were creating an economic powerhouse. And it would have been a National League powerhouse. None more exhibition series. You play one game, and I forgot the name of the cup that was whenever they played each other in exhibition series. You're going to be playing them 6, 7, 8 series a year, minimum. And there'd been no DH. Would have been a National League city. Would have seen baseball the way it was meant to be played. And I know, okay, universal DH now, I surrender. But imagine all those wonderful years of Toronto playing the baseball the way it was designed to be played. They would have also changed how expansion would have happened in 1977. Toronto was going to get a franchise probably because they knew they were going to have to expand because as a settlement for when the Seattle Pilots moved to Milwaukee, Bud Selig bought them out of bankruptcy, moved them. Seattle immediately sued. MLB said, I promise we're going to give you expansion team when we expand. And Toronto, after the Giants scenario, they pretty much locked up their spot as an expansion team. But baseball would have returned to Washington, D.C. probably because Toronto getting an expansion team still wasn't guaranteed because U.S. Congress and President Gerald Ford was saying, no. Baseball has to come back to D.C. Even though it failed twice. The original Washington Senators moved to Minnesota. The expansion Senators lasted until 1971, became the Texas Rangers. They were still going to get another chance. And then further for expansion things, San Francisco, no doubt, after the economic recovery of the 80s, would have been first in line for an expansion franchise in 93. So that would have eliminated either Miami or Denver/Colorado. It also having Toronto and Montreal and Pittsburgh in the National League, it might have greatly improved Buffalo's chances to have gotten an expansion franchise over both the Marlins and the Rockies. So there's that. It's all what if, but. And also another thing to think about is that there would have had to have been realignment in the National League. And logically, you can't have Toronto in the NL West. You already had the Braves and the Reds in the NL West. So the Jays would have gone to the NL East. And then either Atlanta or Cincinnati would have probably gone to the NL East. Probably Cincinnati, because Atlanta liked being in the West because Ted Turner had his fledgling TBS superstation. He liked that. Would have loved to see a Major League Baseball game in Buffalo growing up. Oh, I know. All right, Chris, I absolutely agree. You know, I love Western New York and I love Buffalo. War Memorial Stadium was, oh man, that was a bad place. They had rats bigger than most of my children. But it, you know, when they built Rich Stadium and it's now Salem Field, it was state of the art, and it was designed to have that top put up on top, that level put up on top, so they could easily have acquired a major league expansion franchise because they could have doubled their maximum attendance. And just to give you an idea of the kind of players that they would have been rooting for, the 76 Giants had Darrell Evans, slugging first baseman, sometimes third baseman. They had Chris Spire, great shortstop. Their outfield was Gary Matthews, Larry Herndon, and Bobby Mercer. Not bad, not too shabby. But they had a young Jack Clark come up at the end of July. Pitching staff, pretty solid. John Montefusco, Jim Barr, Ed Halicki, hard-throwing Jersey right-handers, as was Montefusco. John D'Acquisto, a young Bob Nepper. They had a pretty decent farm system. So Toronto Blue Jay fans would have been adopting an existing major league franchise with a storied history and a deep farm system as their own. But alas, no Toronto Giants. We have the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm about out of time. I want to thank you again for tuning in, as you always do every week. If you don't catch the live stream, you can always find the archive show is on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, 3 slots open in the inaugural Jays from the Couch Fantasy Baseball League. You can just send an email, fecklesswonder@jaysfromthecouch.com, or send me a private message on Twitter @FecklessWonder. I am the Fekless Wonder, Steve Fek. For most people, this is just a baseball, but Blue Jay fans know this is a lifestyle. See you next week.